Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wes Mays. I'm mayor of the city of Coppell, and I'm very happy to see everybody turn out tonight. About a month ago, I was at a city convention down in Houston, and I was sitting on a panel, and there was a gentleman that was a member of well, I was attending in the audience, and there was a member of the panel introduced himself as Brad Jones. He was chairman and president of ERCOT. Well, after the last February event, that caught my attention, so I went up to this gentleman after the meeting and struck up a conversation, and he mentioned that he was going to be touring the state, basically talking about what ERCOT had done and what they were doing and what they were going to do. I invited him to come to Coppell, not ever believing he would be here, and surprisingly, he accepted, and I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. Brad Jones, President and CEO of ERCOT. And I'm going to let him take the rest of the show. So thank you very much.
Good. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you. And it is...
I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
I'm sorry. Mayor privilege.
Oh, please, go ahead.
I forgot to introduce two guests tonight. One is our state representative, Julie Johnson from House District 115. And the other is City Council Member Kevin Nevels from the City of Coppell. So I apologize for doing that, but thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I get in trouble with Kevin if I don't introduce him.
I understand. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate that. And the only correction I have is that I'm interim president and CEO. And so I came in May after the event and have been working with ERCOT trying to improve really their response, and not just ERCOT, but the entire market, working with the industry to try to improve the entire industry's response to what we had in February. Let me take you back. I don't want to talk too much because I've actually described these events as a listening event, not a talking event. So I just want to just kind of introduce the topic, and then I'll open it up to you for questions. And I think a lot of the discussion will get to any point of matter that you want to get to. So the February event was unlike anything that I have ever seen in my lifetime, unlike anything that my parents have ever seen. The last time that an event like this occurred was, I believe, in 1895. That it was this cold across all of Texas, north to south, east to west. It was significantly cold. In Brownsville, Texas, 1895 was the last time they had snow, and they had snow this year. Very little, but they still had snow on the ground. It was significant in the way it impacted all of our fleet in the generation market. And I say our fleet, I should be clear with you. ERCOT does not own any generators, but the generation fleet in Texas, all owned by independent private entities and cities and cooperatives and those kinds of things, that fleet was not prepared. Now, a lot of folks, especially the press, have said that those plants didn't weatherize, that they saw, even when 2011 happened, which was our last big weather event back in 2011, they said they didn't weatherize. And I would argue to you that they did. But 2011 was 10 degrees warmer than 2021. And it lasted for a shorter time period, really over 2 days, not the 5 days we had this event. And so when I say that generators did weatherize, they did learn from 2011 and they did respond to it, it was completely inadequate in a 2021 winter. It's obvious. So let me give you a sense of how much generation we lost. In total, we count about 81,000 megawatts of generation is what we count on in our system. And that's really across a summer day. But it's about 81,000 megawatts of generation. 50,000 megawatts of generation were lost during that storm. Let me give you another sense of scale. 50,000 megawatts is the same size as the entire state of California uses on their biggest day, on their peak day. They use 48,000 megawatts. We lost more generation than the entire state of California. And because of losing that generation, ERCOT, our primary role is to balance generation and load, to make sure that those two don't get out of balance, because if they ever do, the system really goes into trouble. It begins to have problems. Frequency will decline. So we have to maintain those in balance. Now, we have a lot of tools that we can draw upon to reduce load from large consumers that have signed up to do that with us. But after we ran through all of those consumers, we needed more. And we went to our distribution providers, like Encore and Centerpoint. You may know some of those names. And those companies acted upon their plans. They each have a plan for how to shed load in one of these events. And their plans are designed to roll customers. And by that I mean that you may be out for an hour, but then your lights should be turned back on and it'll go back over to you, all right? And then it may move down to you, Kevin, after that. And so each customer's home shouldn't be off for very long at a time. The problem was we asked for so much of their reduction that they ran out. They simply didn't have anything in the cupboard. I was retired and I was on my couch and I called up a friend of mine who used to run the City of Austin electricity company, and I said, what is going on? Why are we not rolling customers? And he said, the cupboard is bare. There's nothing left. There's nowhere to go. And when the cupboard is bare, those customers that should have been rolled from one to another in an hour, where their homes may have dropped a few degrees temperature but can catch back up, they now were plunged into darkness, into the cold for hours and some many days. And when a home now has power off that long, you don't drop down a couple of degrees, that home chills down, gets down into the 40s. And now it's hard to bring it back. Those distribution companies recognize that now they can't just turn on a feeder, because as soon as they do, every one of those 100 homes race back up to a normal temperature and they begin blowing out transformers. And so they realized to bring customers back, the event was really over on Wednesday for us at ERCOT, but to bring customers back, they have to turn on individual homes and let them warm up and then move to the next one and let that warm up. And so the recovery took 2 more days before customers could be returned. So it was Friday before the event was truly over. So what has happened? In that time, we have been working to improve generators' performance, to improve their ability to withstand these cold temperatures. We've set new rules in place. ERCOT is inspecting each of those generators throughout the month of December. We'll be inspecting them. And the legislature has given us the power through the PUC to go to the PUC and say these generators have not done what they were supposed to do. And the PUC can assess $1 million fines per day, per instance, for that failure to perform, to weatherize like they should. We are going to begin our inspections on December 2nd. On December 1st, we'll get an attestation from all the generators that says we're ready, we've done what we're supposed to do. And so on the 2nd, we start those inspections. We'll run that all the way through December 23rd. And at that time, we'll have inspected over 300 units in the state of Texas, and we will effectively have been inspecting 85% of the lost megawatt hours during the storm. So we'll be able to look at those plants that had trouble and to make sure that they fix those problems. And the PUC has set those rules in place to allow us to move that forward. So we've worked with the generators. On the other side, on the distribution providers, they need to make sure that they have enough customers that can perform during one of these events, if we have load shed in the future, that customers can be rolled and don't have to be offline for hours and days. And I've talked with each of those CEOs, and they've told me they're ready, that they have done a lot of work to improve their system to allow them to manage a similar type event. Now, I will tell you all, if the 130-year storm hits again this year, which is not out of the realm of possibility, if it hit again this year, I can't tell you that there wouldn't be some load shed. That may still be necessary to keep the system in balance. But I can tell you that performance of both generation and the performance of distribution companies and the performance of ERCOT will be extraordinarily better. That what we will go through this winter, if the same winter happened, would be much better than what we've seen in 2021. I already talked more than I wanted to. So let me turn to questions, because that's where I really feel the engagement of this group. That's where I think that you want to be talking and discussing. That's where I want to be listening as well. Yes, first.
For questions, I don't have questions. I have a mic.
Yes, sir.
You said you're going to be inspecting the generators.
Yes, sir.
What about the fuel from the well
to the generators? Who's going to inspect those?
Good, thank you. Always a tough question to answer, and a very good question. So part of the problem, part of the issue, of those 50,000, about 7,000 megawatts were affected because they did not have enough fuel. They simply couldn't run. So of those 50,000 megawatts that were out, 7,000 of that was related to lack of fuel. Making sure that the natural gas system is ready is very important. Now, that's neither under the authority of ERCOT, nor is it under the authority of the Public Utility Commission. It is under the authority of the Railroad Commission. So, whenever I'm asked that question, I always say, I'm hopeful that they get it right. I haven't given up hope yet. I'm still hopeful they get it right. But let me tell you some positive news. During the storm, there were just a few of those providers, wellheads, compressor stations, those types of things that had signed up for what we call critical infrastructure service, meaning that if the lights do need to be rotated, those outages do need to be rotated, that they would not be rotated because they're critical to keeping the power on. You know, we don't want to have this loop where we turn off power and then that turns off gas. So just a very few of them were signed up, but now over 20 times that number is signed up across the grid. And that's an extraordinary jump. So I'm very encouraged that those suppliers are willing to ask for that critical level service. The rule that the Railroad Commission has out there today, the legislature has been very clear that they have concerns with the rule that the Railroad Commission has offered up, but that rule is not final. It will be final here in December, but it's not final today. So again, as I said, I'm hopeful that they make the right changes. Yes, let her go first, and then I'll bring it over to you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
So my big deal with the episode that we're referring to in February, the messaging was horrible. I mean, it would have been nice to know that we were getting the right story. I was one of those people that would lose it for 12 hours and I'd get it for an hour. But I was getting updates repeatedly from Encore that said it was going to happen, you know, every 2 hours I was going to get it was going to be off and then it was going to be on. So the messaging, can we get the messaging right?
So absolutely perfect question. One of the key areas of failure, I believe, for ERCOT, my organization, is the ability to get that message out appropriately. And why? Is because we'd never seen a situation where customers couldn't be rolled appropriately. And now we are seeing a situation where they were just, at ERCOT, just learning that this was even a possibility. As I said, from my couch in my home, I learned it for the first time that we could actually run out of that possibility. One of the things that I did, the first thing I did when, this is Chris Shine, he is, just like me, he carries an interim tag in front of his title. He is the head of communications for ERCOT, but only interim. I've told him that I will pull him out of there as soon as I leave as well. We're both going together. But what Chris's goal has been is to improve that communications. Part of that is done by actually engaging directly between us and the people at Encore, people at Centerpoint, City of San Antonio, City of Austin, et cetera, making sure that we have those connections with their communicators so that if we're seeing something, we can tell them what we're seeing and they can communicate that with their customers. And that's one of the improvements that Chris has made. In addition, we need, Chris's team is only about 5 persons in total, his communications team. One of the things that Chris is working on is in an event like this, 5 people can't handle all the communications we need to be engaged in. We can't call all of those market participants and talk to them about what's happening. So Chris is engaging to find out what the structure needs to change to, whether we need to bring in consultants in a point like that, whether we need additional personnel. So he's helping to make sure that we have it staffed up for one of those critical events. I have high expectations that Chris is doing an extraordinary job right now, and I believe that if we have a similar event, we can resolve many of those concerns. Yes. I like your shirt, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Tough weekend, though, right?
Yeah, I wasn't liking that. I'd like to know
why, since Texas grid is pretty much independent, well, hopefully it still is, why did we give up so much MVA capacity to frozen windmills and to solar farms that are going to be offline when something goes wrong?
All right. Good, thank you. And he says MVA capacity, so I think have you been in the industry or?
I'm an electrical engineer.
Okay, very good. I'm a mechanical in an electrical business, so I'll come back to you for some help. Yeah, I keep the stuff turning. So it's not really a matter of giving away a certain amount of capacity. That's the type of investment that has come to Texas in the last many years, the last 20 years or so. A lot of it has been renewable generation. Why? Because we have built an incredible market to bring in renewables, but also we have the right resources. We've got a lot of wind out west. We've got a lot of solar insulation throughout the state. It is an incredible environment. And let me give you a story that I like to tell on this. So when I was retired, I was helping a company that was doing development across the U.S. And the head of development was there on the phone, and the guy working for him, while I was on the phone, said, "Boss, I need more people. I got projects in Iowa, I got projects in Illinois, I got projects in Oklahoma, I got projects in Texas. I need more people so that we can get all this work done." And like any boss would say, he says, "No, Tom, you're not getting any more people. But I'll tell you what you need to do. Cancel everything except what's going to Texas." That gives you a sense of how Texas is important in this industry for that type of resource, for solar and for wind. It is such a great place to locate. And so they're all focused on coming to Texas, and there's a big fight for that. Now, what we have to do as an industry and as ERCOT is make sure that we can bring all that resource in and that we can reliably manage it. So yes, wind was offline, but we weren't expecting a lot during that time. And solar was offline, but we weren't expecting hardly anything at that time. And so they did have an impact on us. As I probably didn't say earlier, every resource type was out. We had nuclear out, we had coal out, we had gas out. Solar had snow on it, so it couldn't operate. And we had wind turbines, and they didn't go offline because of the cold weather. They went offline because of the freezing rain. It wasn't because it was cold. They could have operated in that. But the freezing rain is just like an airplane. If you get freezing rain on a wing, just like these propellers are just like wings, you can't operate that turbine. You have to turn it off. And so many of our wind resources went offline for that very reason. But what we have to do is we have to make sure that we have built a system that has the tools necessary to bring in all of those resources and balance them. And we're doing that. It's an incredible challenge. It's an exciting time to be in this industry because it's changing so much, changing in incredible ways. But I do believe that we're doing the right thing to be ready for the future. And I certainly think we're doing the right thing to be ready for this winter. And as I've said before, to build back trust, for ERCOT to build back trust, it's going to take this winter, it's going to take next winter, and it's going to take 100 winters. And summers. And you know, we've always thought about summers as being the scary place. Winters are the scary place. Summers, yeah, we got to prepare for them. We got to be ready for them. But the winters will sneak up on you. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw a hand. Chris? No, I don't think he has a question. No, he doesn't. Oh, I think he was scratching, yeah. I think I saw a Lucy episode where she bid on something at an auction that way.
We heard a question about messaging, and certainly messaging was a big problem. We found out who the board members were of your organization. Most of them have left. Many of them were not from the state of Texas. And what were they doing here? And as people that are caught at the bottom of the food chain, we're the ones that suffered because of the preparations that were not in place. Now, you're temporary, he's temporary. What is your organization doing, and why are you involved and responsible for something like this?
Okay, very good. Thank you. I think there are a lot of questions in there, so if I miss a piece of it, let me know. Let me start with the board itself. Now, the board was comprised of experts throughout the country. And we had people from Minnesota, and there were some from Maryland and from all over the country. And personally, I don't think that's a bad thing. In fact, I've said in the past that if we want, as a state, to figure out how to manage this really cold winter, we probably ought to have somebody from Minnesota on our board to help us think through what those issues are. But I do understand that the legislature felt that it was inappropriate. They wanted to have just Texans on the board because they wanted Texans that were sharing in the pain to be trying to find this solution. And so the legislature, I should say the governor probably, did more to influence those board members to leave. And so they left, and now we have several new board members that have come on. So that's part of the answer to the question. Why did we have them? I don't think it was a problem that we had folks from outside the state, but because the state did feel like it was a problem, it was right for them to go. As for me, interim, I don't plan to ever be a full-time CEO at ERCOT. I was a CEO at New York ISO, a similar organization for the state of New York. And I was the chief operating officer at ERCOT before I went to New York. And I enjoy retirement. I plan to go back to it. So I came back simply because I love Texas. I love ERCOT. I love this industry. And I hated to see it in this shape, in this position. And I wanted to be part of the solution. And it was helpful because coming back, since I was previously COO, I knew all of the players. I knew all the people in the industry. I could make the right phone calls very easily. But more important than that, I knew what the problems were. I knew where things were that we had not fixed them. And why had we not fixed them? Because for the last 20 years, ERCOT, the entire industry, has focused on keeping costs low. And I use this acronym, and I've used it for over 20 years. It's for the industry. It's reliable, affordable, clean electricity. RACE. Reliable, affordable, clean electricity. For the last 20 years, though, I believe it's been spelled clean, affordable, reliable electricity. It's been spelled CARE. We just need to put the R back up front. Okay? We need to recognize that sometimes if you give up on reliability to gain affordability, you lose. And we lost this year. We need to invest in reliability and make sure that we feel like, because I believe that's what drives this industry, that we feel like we got reliability right, that by having reliability first, we'll attract the major companies to Texas. We'll attract those employers, and we'll attract their employees. We'll attract probably more Californians to Texas, right? And we'll do that. It's probably not a good thing, but we'll do that because we have a good economy and because we've got a good, reliable electricity system. I think if we focus too much on affordability, we give up part of that. And really, that's what I think is the thing that, the biggest thing that I think you could point to the ERCOT organization and say that we did wrong is that the last 20 years, we did not fight for reliability. We allowed the market to seek a most efficient structure, but that meant that there were some things that we didn't do. And that's where I've come back in. It's helpful because I know what those things are. I know exactly what those things we need to address. So when I came in, we set up, sorry for the very long answer, but when I came in, again, remember, I was sitting on my couch, and what I describe as the retiree mafia was calling me because I was getting calls constantly from people in the industry, from former CEOs in the industry, from former regulators at the Public Utility Commission, from professors at university, and they were each telling me, this is what we need to do, all right? Here's my list of 10 things that we need to do. And what I did is I wrote them all down because I thought, well, this would be interesting to have a full list. Well, it wasn't a couple months later that I was asked to take this role. It wasn't something I sought, but I was asked. And I was able to take that list then and bring it forward as what we call our roadmap to improving grid reliability. It's a 60 points of initiatives. If you go to our website, we keep it on there because we want you to keep us accountable. We want you to check that list and make sure that we're checking off boxes. But of the 60 items, we've got about 45 of them done right now. They're complete. So we've done a lot. My goal is to finish them all by December. I can promise you I won't do that. I know there's a couple of them that will not make it by December, but we're getting most of that set of initiatives complete. And those items, let me give you an example. Those items, as I said, are things that I know are things that we should have always worked on but didn't. A great example is the Rio Grande Valley. It has nothing to do with the winter storm, but the Rio Grande Valley, we at ERCOT had never built enough transmission. Now, we don't own the transmission, but we do help develop the plans for how to build transmission. And we had never planned for enough transmission to serve those customers in the Rio Grande Valley. I went back and found that all the way back 25 years ago, we were dealing with the same issue and we're always behind. And they're subject to hurricanes in that area, and because of that additional risk of hurricanes, they were subject to significant outages if those conditions occurred. We developed a plan. My goal in that initiative set of 60 was to develop a plan to improve reliability in the Rio Grande Valley. Never thought we'd actually get there by December. Not only did we develop a plan, but the commission got engaged on that issue, was concerned about reliability as well. They have already approved a plan. We're moving those projects forward. So just an example of the benefit of being here before and knowing where the problem areas are and then being able to address it. Yes, sir, in the back.
Excuse me. I grew up in East Texas, and
She's
there
got
was
a
lot of
mic
power.
for you.
There was a lot of power co-ops down there, and they were transitioning from cotton to chicken farms. Well, you need the power on into chicken farms, or otherwise the chickies die, and then you have no money. So my grandparents had some chicken houses, and power was always out. And I asked my parents, what's the deal here? Why is the power always out? It's never out at our house in town. And they said, well, because the people running the co-ops, their idea of infrastructure replacement is when the pole falls over, we'll go put a new one in. And so as a result, you know, they got new people on the board. But I'm from Central Texas, which you know Wayne Christian is from too, and I think you know who he is. And I've asked Wayne some serious questions about this because I knew him back before he was famous. But this is what I think. We've gone too far with the left-wing environmental stuff, and trust me, I'm the biggest recycler on the planet. I've been called names because I pick up grass bags and put them in my recycling stuff. But if we bump the price of power for 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour, keep the coal plants online, suck the carbon out of them, use the windmills and the solar stuff to capture the carbon, put it back in the ground, then in the next 10 years, you know, when they say fusion will be ready, it's always the next 10 years, if you know anything about fusion.
It's always 20 is what I've heard.
Yeah, we can keep the power online because, you know, this never happened while I was growing up. I lived in Minnesota for 6 winters, and you know what? It got 25 and 30 below zero there. We never had any problems. But the last thing I'll say is my brother's a retired fighter pilot. You always plan for what if the mud hits the fan. 15 planes go out, and you're the one that comes back. Nobody else does. I don't remember seeing any, you know, when you called and said, what's going on? And they said, well, you know, we don't have any more power to shed. It's like Churchill asking the big push of September of 40. He asked, well, the Luftwaffe's coming with every plane they got. What else can we put up? And the air marshal said, there's nothing left. We've got everything up. And it was a bad day. So the plan has got to be saving money's great. Keeping the environment pretty is great. But we had, what, 250 people die? That's not acceptable.
So I don't disagree with anything he said. We have to plan for that event. We have to recognize that if more renewables come to our market, we have to have the tools, the dispatchable generation, to meet that demand and keep things in balance. Because we know every single night, not just on a winter event, every single night, solar stops working, right? It does it every single night. And if we get, say, 20,000 megawatts, now 20,000 megawatts, remember, is a big amount. If we get 20,000 megawatts of solar, we better have 20,000 megawatts of other type of resources that can balance it, because that solar comes down over a 2-hour period at night. So we have to be able to balance it. Now, we will do that. ERCOT has already been studying what our future looks like, not just next year, not just the year after that, but 5 and 10 years down the line. And we're building the products, the tools that we need to make sure we can manage those things. But he's exactly right. We have to constantly be on top of it and recognize that even though we're moving that direction, that we have to keep our system reliable. That's most important. You had a question, yes?
I'm kind of piggybacking off of a lot of the questions that have been asked recently. I was going to ask, what was the percentages of energy generation from different sources in 2021, and how has that changed, like in February 2021? Like, what percentage was solar, what percentage was wind? And how has that changed, or has it changed?
It has, and now you challenged me on numbers, so some of these numbers may be made up, okay? All right, but I'm going to get close, right? I'm going to get close on it. So wind, we have, over the years, we built up to more than 25,000 megawatts of wind resources. No state, no 2 states have that much wind. You can't put 2 states together and have as much wind resources as we have, okay? Now, California is ahead of us in solar, but we're catching up very fast. And so before the summer, we had 3,000 megawatts of solar. Okay, fairly small amount, right? 3,000 megawatts of solar. By the end of summer, we had 8,500. Right now, we have over 9,000. By next summer, we'll have probably more than 12,000. And by a year and a half from now, we'll have close to 20,000 megawatts of solar. So you can see how fast that's growing. It's growing incredibly. Wind is still going to grow, but it's really kind of reached the top of its growth. It's, as I said, 25,000 is what we've had. We have about, probably it'll grow to about 30, maybe 35,000 megawatts in total, but it's much slower growth right now. For gas, gosh, I do have to make up these numbers. I would have to figure gas is somewhere around 50,000 megawatts today. Yeah, somewhere in that range. Coal, gosh, I'm really making up numbers now. I don't know. Coal maybe 15%. How much do I have left? Do you keep track? So have I gone over 100 yet?
I think you're good.
Okay. All right. Then I didn't mention nuclear, but nuclear is about 5,000 megawatts in total. So that's less than, it's a little bit more than 5%. That'd be about 6-7% for nuclear. But you can see how it's changing so fast. And that's what we have to get ready for, those new solar units coming online. We have to be able to respond to them in the evening when they go off. Yes, sir.
My question is about maintenance.
Yes.
I understand in the winter, you take a lot of things offline because you don't need as much power in the winter as we do in the summer in Texas.
Yes.
So what are we doing to manage? You know, a lot of it wasn't the weather why we didn't have power, it was because we had a lot of things offline.
Good. Very, very good thought. Now, but I need to correct one thing. Okay, so we do our maintenance in the fall and the spring. Okay, not in the winter, because we know that we're going to need those units during the winter. We know there's a good chance that we'll need them if a cold weather event happens. So very, very little was actually on planned maintenance. The roughly 95% of the outages, more than that, 98% of the outages were on things that broke, not things that were planned down for maintenance, things that broke. As Chris likes to say, these are cars that have a flat tire. They can't keep driving. They have to pull over and they have to fix that flat. That's what we had happen during the winter storm. And so managing our outages, though, it's actually a good question. It's a very difficult thing to do today, because it used to be that, you know, we had summers and then we had winters that we didn't do much maintenance. But the spring and the fall, we did all our maintenance, which is kind of like what we do today. But today, we need generators, a lot of them, to balance our wind. Because wind in the spring and the fall, as you can imagine, goes up and down really quick. And we have to chase after that wind at all times to make up that generation as it goes down. Having enough generation in the spring and fall is difficult because now we have to say to a lot of generators, no, you can't take your outage. We need you. And we say, you can take it next week, but then next week we may need them too. And so we're compressing their outage times in ways that we've never done before. It's a concern in terms of their maintenance. Will this affect their reliability? Because we're giving them less and less time to change the oil. I don't know. I hope it doesn't. They're spending a lot of money to make sure it doesn't. But I wanted to correct that part of your question. Yes, sir.
I'm loaded.
You got a long one there. All right.
Transmission was a problem. Fuel was a problem. Texas is loaded with natural gas. Can you go outside the shores, the boundaries of Texas, and bring in electricity?
Very good question. Now, two types of transmission. You were talking about electricity transmission, not gas transmission. Very good. So transmission, this is the long answer. I apologize. Just as long as what you got on your pad there. Let me start this way. All right. For you, this is the East Coast. Okay? This is all the East Coast. All the way from Canada, all the way down to Florida is on one electric grid. One huge electric grid. All the way over to Colorado. That's how big it is. North to south, all the way to Colorado, all the way to the eastern seaboard. One electric grid. It's called the Eastern Interconnection. On the west, everything from Colorado all the way to California, all the way to the northernmost part of Mexico, so includes part of Mexico, and all the way up to Canada, as I said. It's all on the Western Interconnection. And then there's Texas. Texas has its own interconnection. A lot of people say, why? Why did we do that? Well, it's probably the same feeling most of you have. We all have this feeling of independence in Texas. We never wanted the federal government. Interconnection. So ERCOT has its own interconnection. We don't rely upon other states. We provide our own power, our own interconnection. Why do we do that? Because our fathers and leaders before us wanted us to be independent so that we could make the laws that are best for Texans. We often feel that way, right? That local control, city of Coppell can make, where's Wes? You still Wes? City of Coppell can probably do better on making rules for the citizens of Coppell than, let's say, the North Texas Council of Governments. Would you agree?
We agree with that.
Yes. So the state of Texas can set their rules better for the state of Texas than the federal government can, which has really led us to the most admired competitive market in the world. I didn't trip there, in the world. Now, what happened in February greatly damaged that reputation. But for 20 years, we've been the most admired competitive market in the world. So we kept separate so that we can set our own rules. But there's always questions, does that damage us long-term for reliability? Could we have gotten power from other states? The federal government looked into this issue. They just recently issued their draft report. Their official report hasn't come out yet. But in their draft report, they identified a number of areas that need to be fixed. And I will tell you that we have already addressed and are addressing every single one of those areas. So remember, their report is draft. We're already well along into making it happen. That's another good reason to keep it in Texas. But what the federal government said was because the areas to the north and to the east of us were all having the same cold weather, all struggling with power, many of them having load shed, customers that were out. When we called on power, and we do have two small, what we call DC interconnections that are controlled flows. When we called on power from the other states, they told us no, because they needed it themselves. That's our agreement. We understand they can tell us no. That's the same agreement we have with them. If we're having trouble, we won't send power out to them. They told us no, which I believe is a good example of why if we were interconnected in the big Eastern Interconnect, it would not have helped us. We would not have been able to get the power supplies that would have really changed anything in Texas.
So do we need additional, over by Mountain Creek Lake, there's a generation facility.
I know it well.
It's been there since before I was born. Do we need more generation plants?
So what happened in the winter was not a matter of do we have enough. It was a matter of do we have the weatherization right to keep them online. Remember, I said we had 80,000 megawatts. If every one of them was working, our maximum load during that week was expected to have been 76,000 megawatts. Now, I should note that we've never had a winter peak that high. Our winter peak is in the 60,000s. So that 76 would have been extraordinary because it was an extraordinary cold weather event. But if we had all 84,000 megawatts operating, we would have could easily gone through that event. But instead, we lost 50,000 megawatts. So it's not really an issue of do we need more? We always need more. But it was more an issue of do the ones we have are they weatherized appropriately to go through this type of storm?
So I do have.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, she was first, then we'll come right back to you.
Hi. The event was catastrophic. Sorry. While some people were able to move on, some people were not, and myself included. I'm still dealing with the aftermath of that event. So my question is, well, twofold, two questions. One is, what is ERCOT going to do to compensate those of us who are still dealing with the aftermath of that event, the catastrophic disaster? And number two is, how come some people never lost power? I know I had friends who never lost any power, and they were fine the whole time.
And thank you for speaking up. I truly am saddened by the experience of all Texans, yourself included. As you know, many lost lives during the storm, some because their power was out. It's sad for me well, I can't put it into words. It's why I came back to see if we could help fix this problem. What I can guarantee to you is that we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that that never happens again, that we're prepared for this next time. Why do some people have their power left on? Let me describe how distribution providers manage outages like this situation. So when we ran out of power, we had to cut off customers. And as I said earlier, we cut off about 20,000 megawatts. Nothing like that has ever been done. I don't think anything like that has been done in the world. And 20,000 megawatts were shut off during that winter storm. And as I said, those distribution providers ran out of feeders they could roll. Now, why they couldn't roll all of their feeders, why they couldn't turn off all their feeders and rotate them, is because there are many that have critical infrastructure on them, meaning like hospitals and fire stations and things that are just extremely important to keep online and available. And one of the things that they were struggling with, the distribution companies, is if they have 100 homes on a circuit, but there's one hospital, all 100 homes kept their lights on because the hospital did. Now what they're looking at is ways to sectionalize those lines so they can continue to serve that hospital, but so those other residents could participate in that rotating load shed. That's one of the major solutions that each of the distribution companies have committed to. And they're well on the path. They're not complete. They won't be complete by this winter, but they have done a lot of work so far to get ready for it. So that's why some circuits stayed on and some did not. And I know a lot of folks have said, well, when I sell my house, I'm gonna say that, my house wasn't turned off during the storm. Well, that's great for them if they could sell their house, maybe get some more money, but we're working very hard to make sure that is not a reality in the future, that they will not, simply because they're next to a fire station, be able to keep their lights on. We want all customers, all Texans, if such an event happens again, should help each other by sharing in that loss and rotating, hopefully no more than an hour at a time. I think you had a question. Did you, or was it Becca?
No,
okay.
I do.
I promise it's my last question.
You don't need to promise.
What is the accountability for your promises? I mean, I mean, I hate to say it, but we had a blame game going on for a couple months after the February disaster. And how are we going to hold the providers' feet to the fire? And who's going to, make sure that there's accountability if it ever happens again?
Good. So just as a reminder, you recall, a big part of the solution is weatherization of the generators. And so accountability there is $1 million per instant per day. That gets to be a pretty big price tag very quickly. And so those generators will be held to that standard because we're going to inspect them and make sure they've met that standard. And if they haven't, we will make sure that the commission takes them up on a proceeding to enforce that penalty. Now, from the wire side of things, the wire side is fully regulated by the Public Utility Commission, meaning rate regulation and everything. And if their performance is not up to the standard the commission wants, they will penalize that company through the revenues that they make. So there's accountability across the board. I can tell you from my side, I feel it every day. I've had 8 meetings with the governor. 3 of them were good, right? 5 of them were not good. I've got one tomorrow. I'm not looking forward to it, right? Because the governor's got an expectation, as he should, that everything should already be done. Why are we still working on things? And there's more things that need to be done and more things we're working on. And some of it's just is taking some time to get there. So I don't think it's going to be a good meeting tomorrow. But that's part of the accountability. I hear about it every day. But I also, the reason why I'm here tonight is because I want to hear it from you. Okay? I want you to hold me accountable. I want you to know me. I want you to be able to contact, make sure that you engage with me if there's these types of concerns. I want you to have that flexibility, and I want all Texans to have that. And you probably didn't hear, but I'm here today, and I'm in Carrollton tomorrow, and I'm in Brownsville next week, and I'm in Tyler, and I'm in Wichita Falls, and I'm in San Antonio, and I'm in Houston, and I am in Waco, and I am in Tyler, and I am all over the state and wearing out my tires right now because I want to be able to stand in front of folks like you and be held accountable. Thank you. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. We skipped you. She is first. I'll come right back to you.
Now, well, my question is, you talked about weatherization and maintenance, and how old are these systems that we're weatherizing and maintaining, and at some point is it time to replace? I mean, like if we're taking care of our own home, we rely on our unit for 20 years, it works, we have them come in and maintain it, and they say, you're good for another year, you're good. And then they say, you know what, it's time, that's it. It's not going to serve your purpose. How old is what we have?
So there's 2 parts of the question, transmission and generation. Let me deal with both. And distribution for that matter. Transmission in Texas, there's a lot of it that's pretty old. It was built in the 50s. But we don't have near the problem that the rest of the country has.
It doesn't matter. We're only working in Texas.
But we are.
We don't care what everybody else is doing.
I know it.
We're isolated. We want to know how much it costs.
We're not perfect, but we're doing pretty damn good. I'll tell you that. So we're doing pretty damn good on investing in transmission. No other state does investment like we do in transmission. We are sinking billions of dollars in transmission, not every year. We're sinking about $1 billion in transmission every year across the entire state. It's an extraordinary investment. In New York, when I got to New York, sorry, I am going to tell you about another state, but when I got to New York, they hadn't built major transmission in 30 years. While I was there, I got them to build 2 major transmission lines. They hadn't done it in 30 years. They hadn't built major transmission. That's not us. We're ahead of that. From the generation side, because we have a competitive market, the older generators very quickly that just can't keep up, that can't be economic, they leave. If their maintenance costs are high, they leave because our competitive market drives them out. Right? They can't make the money. So we have a fairly new fleet as well. Now, where our fleet is oldest, it's in the coal plants. Okay, that's probably the oldest of our fleet. There are a few new ones, but most of that is.
What is old? When you say old?
The oldest of the coal plants would be 1970s. Roughly. The newest was 2007. So, that was pretty young, right? The gas plants, there are some 50s era, I'll say 60s era gas plants, 60s era gas plants, but most of those don't run very often, right? And so we, back in 2000, when we went to competition, essentially what happened is there was a flood of investment of new efficient gas plants and drove all the old ones out. They had to shut down. So most of the gas plants are really from 2000 on. What I missing, nuclears were in the 80s. I don't think we're going to build any nuclears, and I think we're done there, so at least for a while. And then what am I missing? Wind and solar. Solar is all built this year, right? And wind has been built in the last 10. So we have a fairly young fleet as well.
Is what we have in wind different than what Minnesota has?
So they have, and you're talking about cold weather packages. They have something, they spend money on what's called a cold weather package, which protects it from seals and things like that from cold weather. But the event we had, as I said earlier, wasn't about cold weather, it was about freezing rain. If they have freezing rain in Minnesota, it affects their units just like it does us. They don't have it very often in Minnesota, but if they do, it affects them the same way it does us here. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer this exactly. It may be a guess, but you said that we lost 50,000 megawatts. Let's assume we're going to have an identical problem this February. Because of all the improvements you said that are being made, can you guesstimate how many we're going to lose?
Wow, yeah. We just went through this exercise. I can't remember the numbers exactly, but what I can tell you is that of those scenarios, the worst case, I'll answer your question differently because it's all I remember. Of those scenarios, the worst case was one that had a loss of 6,800 megawatts of load. We're not talking about generation, but when you subtract all the things, what's left is we had to have load shed on 6,800 megawatts. That is our most, I'll say most conservative estimate, but by that I mean that's our worst case estimate, 6,800 megawatts. Remember, we lost 20,000 this year, so that's a level of improvement. What is our expected case? If we had the exact same winter storm, it's probably still around 1,500 megawatts. And that's why I've said I can't guarantee you there won't be load shed. If we have the same 1 in a 130-year weather event this year, I can't guarantee you there won't be load shed. But I can guarantee you that it will be done better than it was done in the past.
So instead of 3 days without electricity, maybe 2.5.
So, no, exactly this way. So if you have 20,000 megawatts, remember the cupboard is bare. You have no more, even though we've actually added more. But 20,000 megawatts, we ran out. At 6,800, we believe that we can roll customers effectively throughout the system, and that customers shouldn't be out for more than an hour at a time. We believe that we can do that. And in fact, in 2011, we talked about 2011. In 2011, 4,800 megawatts of customers were rolled, and they were rolled effectively an hour at a time. The longest any customer was out that I know of was 3 hours. But most customers were rolled every 30 minutes to an hour. So we can manage that type of an event. And I believe that we'll be able to manage 2021 if it happens again this year. I can't guarantee there won't be any load shed, but we'll manage it better. Yes, ma'am.
2011 should have been a wake-up call as far as communication after that snowmageddon. 2021, it kind of worsened, and still there didn't seem to be any type of corporate communication plan in place by ERCOT or to speak to the different providers of service. Is there one for 2022 going forward? Item number one. And item number two, what is your plan, even as interim, to communicate to the people of Texas that you've got this handled, that it's information that we can depend upon, that it's not going to be the blame game of, no, it's Encore. No, it's ERCOT. No, it's this. No, it's that. That's been the frustrating part for many of us, myself included. And I just need that sense of confidence that whatever we hear, whatever's reported in the news, will be information that has come from one source or has been agreed upon to be the message that needs to get out to the people, and the message is honest and forthright.
Good, thank you. Great points. The first part of your question, I think you must have come in a little bit later because we addressed the first question, but let me cover that again. Again, this is Chris Shine. He's the interim head of communications. What he's been working on is making sure that there's much better coordination through the entire industry, ERCOT to each of the transmission providers and distribution providers, making sure that we have a consistent message to pass along to consumers so that there's not finger pointing and there's not misunderstandings, but we're all speaking the same message and a clear and truthful message that can go to every consumer. And so that's what Chris has been working on. We'll be talking with the transmission companies, we'll be talking with the retailers that serve these areas, and we'll be making sure that they have the messages to carry those forward. In addition, the legislature gave us the capability through SB 3, I guess it was. They gave us the capability to announce, kind of like an Amber Alert, when there's one of these conditions, so that you can get the alert, you can get it on your phone, or you can see it on a roadside sign, and you can go and you can fill up your bathtub and get things ready and make sure that you have everything you need in your home for when one of these events might occur. So that's one way that we're communicating better with everyone in the public. In addition, we're working extremely closely with the Public Utility Commission, and they help us to amplify our messages, to get them out into the public, to make sure that if there are these concerns, that they're being addressed, and also communicate the solutions that we're driving today to make sure this doesn't happen again. So they're helping us to amplify that. In addition, I speak all over the state. And I speak in these forums, and I speak to the press. I just got through 2 interviews with the press. That's part of how I get the message out, to say, here's what we're doing, here's our solutions, and how we're going to fix this. That's the second part of your question was, how do you communicate to us that you guys have it, right? That you got it, know what you want to do, and you can fix it. That's how we have to do it. I have to do it small, and I have to do it big. I have to cover it from both angles. And I'm as I said, I'm all over the state in the next few weeks to make sure that I have the opportunity to have that communication with you and others. Did I miss anything?
Trust.
Trust. So trust, there it is.
Yeah.
Rebuilding trust.
That hasn't,
So
I haven't heard that. I appreciate you coming in to the Lion's Den, but I haven't heard, I don't feel that sense of trust. I don't feel that sense of confidence. I don't feel that sense of coordination yet. And maybe there's something forthcoming that will provide that. But at this point, I hear great numbers, I hear great information and great facts, but I don't feel.
But you don't feel it yet. You don't feel it.
No.
And I don't expect you do. So I just recently, I like to read a lot, and I just recently finished a book about trust. And interesting thing it said is that it talked about the fact that trust reduces costs. It was putting in business terms. I mean, if you trust somebody, we'll do a deal, right? We'll shake hands, and tomorrow we'll have a deal. If I don't trust you, I'm going to bring in a lawyer, and we're going to have a contract, and we're going to spend hours and days on that contract. And so there is value in trust, and that it saves time and it saves money. The one concern is if you lose trust. It's hard to rebuild trust. It's hard to regain it. I don't expect by spending a few hours with you all tonight that you're going to walk away and say, well, I trust ERCOT and everything must be okay. No, we have to continue to prove ourselves. And as I said earlier, it's not one winter, it's not 2 winters, it's every winter for 100 years. We have to continue to prove ourselves to you now. Now, we had the trust of everyone, but we've lost it. What this book said was interesting. It said some people would say you can't regain trust once you've lost it. Once you've done something to spoil that relationship, you can't regain it. But I went on to argue that you really could, because when you think about your kids, you know you can get your mind in that situation where you say, your son has gone out, and you let him use your car, and he's gone out and he got pulled over by the cops for driving too fast. He's severely broken your trust. You trusted that he would follow the laws and handle that vehicle well. But at least with your son, we know he can rebuild that trust by changing his behavior and proving to you over time that he has changed that. You will regain that trust. It's a difficult thing to do, but I'm willing to commit to that. And I don't expect you tonight or really over this next winter to come back and say, I fully trust ERCOT. I expect you over, many years to come to that, but I'm willing to commit to that. Yes, ma'am.
Accountability is a wonderful thing, and for those of us that are clients, ERCOT has no accountability, because if your son gets a car, and he drives that car in the cold weather, and that car stops running, and you don't know about it, and your son dies because the car didn't run in cold weather that you thought it did, you bought it, you can sue the car dealer. We don't have any ability to reach ERCOT. We don't have any ability to inflict pain on ERCOT. We don't have any ability to get any accountability from ERCOT. You've had 3 questions from people with the very same question, and you've not answered one of them. And that's because we have no accountability. There's no trust where there's no accountability. That's how we feel.
Okay, very good. I've tried to answer them.
And you're interim.
Yes.
So what accountability do you have as interim?
So
yeah, and I totally agree with her, because I think it was nicely played by them.
Yes.
To send someone who's interim.
Yeah, we appreciate
it. Okay, because it's like we're looking for someone.
First of all, no one sent me. Let me start there.
Okay.
No one sent me.
Well,
you're
here, and your commitment that you're giving us has no teeth.
Right, no teeth. I appreciate there's a representative here, maybe that she can hear our voice and say, we don't appreciate being cut out of this. We're cut out, we have no accountability at all. So you're not accountable to us.
I'm not sure how that's true.
Well, we can't sue you.
So we are being sued.
Soon.
We are being sued. And
By homeowners.
homeowners are suing us. Okay. So we are being sued. Our board was all fired. Several of our executives have been fired.
We appreciate that.
Several of our executives have been fired.
We appreciate that.
And I do have a problem with you saying I didn't answer those questions, because I seriously tried
What are you
it.
going to do for her?
What are you going to do for me?
her?
What are you going to do? What are you going to do for me?
For her repairs,
For her repairs.
her cost,
Right.
her burden.
I don't know that there's a place that ERCOT can get involved in individual homeowners.
I'm not a homeowner,
So you're, Chris, I don't know if you can help me, but so what compensation are you looking for?
So I've been in a hotel because my apartment was flooded and I had nowhere else to go.
Okay.
Who's going to pay for the hotel after renter's insurance is done?
Okay.
FEMA is I applied for FEMA, it's very hard to.
Very hard.
It's very time consuming and hard to pay. My family is supporting me, I'm very fortunate. I'm one of the lucky ones because my family is supporting me, my family is helping out, my friends helped me out. If I didn't have that, where would I be, where would I go? And who would help me after everything?
Yeah.
Because we're in one of the worst housing markets also.
So ERCOT's role is smaller than what you may think. So ERCOT's role is primarily to balance generation and load. I know that there have been several lawsuits against ERCOT, but also against generators for having outages. There have been several lawsuits against ERCOT, but also against distribution providers. ERCOT's role, we don't own transmission, we don't own generation. So our role is very limited. So when you ask, what can I do for you, I really don't have a mechanism to support that. I know the state has looked at ways that they can assist people that were harmed by this event, people that that had high bills from this. They looked for ways to assist there. But I don't know that ERCOT can be part, is really part of that individual consumer. How do we get to that individual consumer, right? Where we have been, where all of our focus has been on making sure this doesn't happen again, making sure the industry is ready for that. I don't have an answer for if you had a broken pipe in your home. I don't have an answer for that. During the storm, I saw a apartment house, San Antonio, on the news, burned to the ground. Everybody lost their homes. Something like 100 apartments. Everyone lost their homes. Why? Because the fire hydrants were frozen. I don't know how to step in and fix that either. There's so much in Texas that wasn't ready for that cold weather. There are billions of dollars of losses, but more important than that, there are hundreds of lives that have been lost. I feel that strongly. I feel that. But I don't know how ERCOT steps into that role. And so when you ask me, what can I do for you? All I think I can do for you is tell you that we're working to make sure this never happens again. And I know you're not satisfied. I'm really upset you're not satisfied with upset. I'm concerned that you're not satisfied with my answers, but I am trying to give a very earnest answer.
It's impossible to discuss, to have trust from anybody where there's no accountability.
Yeah.
And sadly, when we called for help, we were told by Encore, it's ERCOT. We were told by our provider, it's ERCOT.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can we get help when all we got was voicemail help? There was no one to talk to, there was no explanation, there was no understanding, there's no one to help to direct the traffic to an individual who had resources to provide people.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem.
That's right. And I agree. That's where Chris is working to make sure that we have that communication with those retailers. The retailers should be that first line of defense. They should be the ones that give you the answer.
And that was voicemail, and if you
when
had a friend you could call.
And when they're passing it up the line, that makes me mad,
Yeah,
right? They're pointing up the line because ERCOT has agreed with them that they are to have a plan, and they execute the plan when we ask that to be done. And for them just to say that's ERCOT's fault,
And worse than
it's
that,
their
they
plan.
said it's windmills and solar, and why do we need clean
And
when
all
we've
that-
never had problems?
See, that is just silliness. And so
We heard it.
I know, it's just silliness. And that's what Chris is helping us to address. We're making sure that we can get those right messages out, that we can get ahead of that where it says, that this was all a wind event. It wasn't all a wind event. That was part of it. We can't lose that. It was part of the problem, but it was not all of the problem. We will get better on communications. We're working on that. Building that trust with you is going to be difficult. I believe there is accountability because several folks lost their jobs. All of the board lost their job. That's a level of accountability, right? The CEO was fired at ERCOT. That's a level of accountability.
That's after the fact, because 10 years before, they had the power to do something, and they didn't. They let anybody opt out of weatherizing and doing what they needed to do to be prepared for something like this.
Okay, well, part of it, but remember what I was talking about earlier is that they did prepare for 2011. The generators, remember, this is not ERCOT.
From 2011 to now, there were some recommendations made for them to be prepared there were some specific recommendations made for them to do, but they were given the opportunity to opt out. I mean,
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the natural gas rule. It actually hasn't been completed yet. It's still being discussed. And that's on the Railroad Commission side. That's not ours.
He or she?
Where's he or she?
We're looking for accountability.
Well, if you want to name, who's the person that said Wayne Christian? He's now left. But Wayne Christian is the chairman of the Railroad Commission. If you want a name, that's who you send your letter to. Yeah, real quick. Wayne Christian is the person you go to, but trust me, Wayne Christian has heard, right? He's heard from all the legislatures. He's heard from individual consumers that have contacted him. He understands the concern, and that's why I keep saying I'm hopeful that they fix that rule, but I can't say.
So that word hopeful?
Yes.
Makes everyone cringe.
It makes me cringe too.
It's like hopeful? Tell us how much money it's going to take to do it, and then you just said you need to, affordability versus reliability.
Mm-hmm.
What is the money that it's going to take to make it right, to fix it?
So I don't know the money that they're dealing with on that side, but the relative to the bundle of money the gas companies made, it's got to be a fraction of that. So they made a lot of money during the storm. The electric companies all lost. They all lost billions. Gas companies all made billions of dollars. And so they're perhaps not as motivated as the rest of us to fix the problem. Unfortunately, I can't walk over there and fix it. All right?
Who do we need to walk over to
Wayne Christian.
motivate them? Is that him?
Wayne Christian's the head, but all of the legislature, and you probably know this issue as well, all of the legislature is keenly aware of this issue. And they've been putting a lot of pressure on the Railroad Commission to change their rule. As I said, it's not final. It's still being discussed. But they've been putting a lot of pressure to change that. They haven't done that yet. Yes, sir.
Note the extra effort that the generators and the delivery companies have gone through, secondary fuel sources beyond the rules. I mean, I think that will help more folks.
So what he's doing is he is throwing gas under the bus. But let's do that for a second. The Public Utility Commission got engaged quickly. They began to work. They began to set rules. They began to set requirements. The legislature worked quickly. They set rules. They set requirements. The industry of the electric side, independent of rules being set, moved forward and spent tens of millions of dollars, every one of these generators, to make sure that they have weatherized their facilities. So they did that. The gas side has acted differently. The Railroad Commission has not moved forward very quickly. The members have fought this generally. The legislature is aware of that. I sat in a Senate committee hearing, and I sat right next to the main, not one of the commissioners of the Railroad Commission, but the main staff member, the guy that leads all their staff. Sat next to him, and the Senate members, both Democrat and Republicans, said a most amazing thing. They said, we can't remember the last time that all of us agreed on the same issue, but we all agree that what you're doing is wrong, and you need to fix it. So Railroad Commission's hearing, we'll have to wait and see.
Maybe that's the issue, because they don't know what's wrong, so they don't know what to look for until it's fixed.
No, that's not it. They know it's wrong. They know what they need to fix. Their belief is, number one, that they really don't have to fix it this winter. They'll fix it next. Okay. Number two, they don't believe that every one of the gas facilities has to weatherize, and that may be true, but we need to identify which ones are which. And they just haven't moved it forward very quickly. That's why I keep saying I'm hopeful. How much hope? It's pretty slim, but there's still hope. Okay? And every time you cringe, I cringe the same amount. Okay? Because that 7,000 megawatts out of that 50,000 was because of gas. Yes, see, look at all the questions you guys started over here. If you don't mind, let me go over here first.
So you were talking about reliability and sort of the path to walk down that process, and I believe you said December inspections are happening, or between now and December or something like that.
In December.
So as we approach those inspections, what percentage of these generators do you expect to or think will be in compliance when that inspection happens? Because I'm assuming this is a little bit of a long process that, they may not all get there the first time, but what percentage do you think we'll be in compliance?
Now I'm really making up stuff now, right? So I think in the end, we'll have a very high percentage, I think in the 90s. But to get there, the first inspections may not be complete, right? We may find that, all right, somebody has failed to do everything they need to, and we'll report that to commission, but at the same time, we'll say, oh, we'll be back in a week, and we want to see this fixed. So it may take some time to get there, even though we'll finish all the first rounds by December 23rd. It may take some time to get everything complete. I think we'll have a high degree of successful weatherizations inspections at the end. I believe it will be well into the 90s. Because, and the reason why I say that is because these generators have been working on this since really midsummer. They've been getting their plans together, investing, getting the equipment on site. Some of the delays may be because of supply chain issues. Some of the delays may be because they just goofed and forgot something. But I think that we'll be able to identify those and make sure that they get them done very quickly. Thank you. Yes, sir. Here, right behind you.
You made two comments. We lost 50,000 megawatts during the storm. You also mentioned that we had a fuel shortage. And you also said that there were transformers that failed. Let me start with the transformers. Did they fail because they were in need of being replaced and were aging?
No, sir. So the reference I made to the failure of transformers was in the local distributions networks. As the customers were being brought back from load shed and the homes were cold, when too many of those customers were tried to bring them back at the same time, they were overloading the transformers. It wasn't age, it was just overloading.
And I think you addressed that they were trying to reduce the quantity of people that they're going to give power to so that you don't cause another problem.
That's how they came back slowly.
And if we lost fuel and we lost this large quantity of electrical capacity, what was the reason for us losing fuel?
So what happened in many facilities is at the wellhead or at the compressor station along that gas transmission pathway, something froze up or they lost power. Now, to be clear, the gas problem happened before the electric problem. But once the electric started going out, that loop comes back, which means more gas facilities didn't have power, and they froze up as well. So it was a freezing condition, the wellheads and compressors, that led to loss of gas.
This is an easy one. How can we help ourselves and help you?
I would love for everyone in this room to contact the Railroad Commission.
Really?
Done.
All right, good. Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming up and, as somebody said, standing in the lion's den, and you answered some tough questions. So I'm going to ask you another one that might be a little tough, but you have the interim title, as you said. Who's responsible for hiring and firing you? Who is responsible for hiring the next CEO? And I think it's absolutely great that you're going around and you're answering these questions. But I think what I'm hearing from the people is who's going to be that permanent person? Not necessarily, but what does that process look like to getting to that permanent person? And what does that path look like for the future?
Good, thank you. And I say thank you because I am as much interested in that answer as you are. The process for getting a new CEO usually takes about 6 months. They do a nationwide search, they bring in candidates, they interview candidates, get all the board to agree on those candidates, and then they select them. The base level answer to your question is the board makes all of those decisions. Interim CEO, new CEO. The new board that's now in place. Yeah. And so that board will make all decisions on the new CEO. The process for the new CEO has already started. I believe at a minimum, it'll take 6 months. I said that 3 months ago. I thought I'd be done in December because I'm ready to go back to being retired. Okay? As I said, I wanted to be here because I wanted to help out. I want to be part of the solution for Texas. But I like retirement. I'm ready to go back. And so I think now I'm here through March, which is good because then that gives me a chance to go through the winter, to lead the group through the winter. But I'm hoping that that time frame is somewhere around March or maybe April. It'll be a year at the end of April for me.
So you're saying you'd rather be retired than stay here and answer all the questions?
I didn't say that. I said I'll come back even after retirement. As much as I enjoy being part of the solution, I retired for a reason. I want to be back there. Yes, sir.
You know, you said that the Railroad Commission's dragging their feet. Who is responsible or who is able to put a burr under their saddle to get them?
Well, that's a difficult question. And so you would say the governor should have some influence, the legislature should have a lot of influence. There's a key difference in this commission, though, the Railroad Commission, and any other in the state of Texas. They're elected members. So as an elected member, you can't fire them. Remember, the Public Utility Commission, every one of their members were fired after this event. All of them were fired. Well, some resigned, but they all left. Okay, they're all gone. And they brought in a new set. You can't do that to an elected member. You can't fire an elected member. So it's a little bit different. So the governor has some influence over them, but it's not the same as the PUC. The Public Utility Commission, they have ultimate influence over it, but they don't with the railroad. So the railroad can kind of make its own mind. They could tell the legislature and the governor they don't care what they're thinking and do their own thing. I'm hoping that everyone in this room helps to convince them otherwise.
Well, what do you think would happen or would possibly happen if the people went up in arms and started a recall of the elected officials?
Yeah, I don't know how recalls work in this state, but let me say it differently. The Railroad Commission is concerned about their elections, and they should be. If they fail to answer to the citizens of Texas, they should be concerned. And that's what I hope each of you will let them know, is that you expect them to answer to the citizens of Texas. Yes, sir.
I have two different questions.
Yes, ma'am, sorry.
One of them is it correct that after the primary elections have been held, which will be next March, that after that we should be expecting to see a significant rise in what we're charged for our electricity, trying to make up for those people that were suddenly having to buy it for $9,000 a second, or that's an exaggeration. And my other question is, how about ERCOT or some similar organization really giving heavy publicity to preparedness? I'm finding people who didn't know not to open their refrigerator doors, that didn't know not to open the freezer. A freezer can keep food cold, and goodness, in a 40-degree house, it can keep it cold for longer.
You can stick it outside, I mean, you froze it forever.
Okay. And to have on hand some canned food, I mean, because there was nothing to heat with.
Yeah.
And to know that if you're able to stay dry, wool keeps you warmer, but if you're going to be wet, wool keeps you warmer, but if you're going to be able to stay dry, down jackets and comforters will keep you warmer, because I wore a down coat and sat under a down comforter and wore gloves and sat by a window so that I could read a book. It was really hard to turn those pages with gloves, but you can survive it. You can make a little stove out of ceramic, you know, those clay flower pots, but you have to know how to do it.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend in Washington State to see how she was doing after their windstorms, and she had no idea that she shouldn't have been opening her refrigerator and her freezer. She said, no, I never even thought of just having peanut butter sandwiches. So there needs to be, not everybody grew up being a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout. And, you know, publicize ways to survive it. It's quite possible.
I very much agree with that. And we have been working to make sure that, remember, ERCOT is one step away from the customer. ERCOT really, our responsibility just runs to the edge of the transmission grid. And so we've been working with TDSPs and the retailers to make sure they get that message out. But more than anything, more than that, we have been working specifically with the state to make sure that in emergency, the state is able to communicate the information they need to communicate. And that's where I've been on a committee with the head of the state emergency organization, that every time there's a hurricane or a windstorm or a tornado or anything, they establish this organization that controls DPS and works with electricity and TCEQ and others, and provides information. So we've been working to help them to get that information out. But you had a piece of your question that was at the beginning, and I've already forgotten what it was.
I read, and it was in the paper, not social media, so I assume it was a little more reliable, that we are all in for some surprise hikes.
Good. So
that it's time to come after the primary election.
Well, I don't think it's really actually time, but it will. It's going to be before the primaries. So there were some bills that were passed to assist in some consumers that had high electric bills, to assist them. And those bills that were passed by the legislature are called securitization bills. Those monies will. Unfortunately, it's a very complicated process. But let me just say that each of those companies, including ERCOT, will go out to markets, they'll get bonds, and then those bonds will be paid over the next 30 years. The cost of those, I had to wrench the arm of my finance guy to get an estimate, and he told me never to share this, so I'm going to share it with you now. The cost of those are somewhere like 60 cents a megawatt hour. So for you, in a month, your home probably uses close to 1 megawatt hour, but across the whole month. So it'd be about 60 cents to you. So it's not a big jump, but your bill should be 60 cents higher. So yes, it will go up. It's not timed to be after that election. It actually probably will happen. One of the bills will be effective in the next couple of months. The other securitization bill will be effective in the end of the first quarter of next year. And so that's when that 60 cents should start. But it's relatively small for your overall homeowner's bill. Have you had enough? Am I getting the hook?
No, I think I remember I told you when you came out here that you were going to have some very difficult questions. Did I not?
And I told you that's what I wanted to come for.
So let's limit this to another question or two, and then
fantastic.
I'm going to make the offer that you'll stick around and answer individual questions after the event.
I'd love to. I'd be happy.
Okay. So anybody else question?
Yes, sir.
I just have a quick question. We've been talking all night about the weather event, but the grid is under assault for more than that. Mm-hmm. So could you speak very quickly about hacking of our SCADA systems and so forth by China, Russia, whatever? Also, the ultra-high voltage transformers from transmission. Very old, hard to get, expensive, size of this building.
Yeah.
What's to be done to replace those in case one of them comes under some kind of assault?
Okay, let me start backwards, so go with what you last said. That's easier. What you last said was about the transformer. Most of the major transmission companies, they hold several of those transformers, multiple types in fact, in reserves. And they also trade them. So if they have a transformer out and Encore needs to call up CenterPoint and say, CenterPoint, we need one of yours. If they have an extra spare, they'll send it up. And if they don't, they'll go across the country and find one. So these utility companies share that equipment and trade it. And even some of them, to save money, have combined in their spare parts, essentially, is that they all share the same set of transformers that they have in the spare in some warehouse. So those, you're right. If you had to replace one right from the scratch, it could be years to get one in. But they have those so that they can get them in a month or so.
A month?
Yeah, it's still a long time.
Those ground level?
Yes, yes, sir. And the month is, a lot of that is moving it, right? You got to block highways to move something like that. It's not just street worthy. And I've forgotten your first question.
The first one was
cyber.
hardening the SCADA system and all that against hacking.
Yeah, what we call cybersecurity. So I can really only deal with the ERCOT side of things. I know that the rest of the utilities also have their own cybersecurity protections in place. At the national level, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, has a set of standards for how to protect all of the equipment, SCADA and everything else. And so all the utilities are audited on that on a regular basis and required to maintain that high level of standard. From a cybersecurity standpoint, we work extraordinarily because we are a major target, okay? We work extraordinarily in-depth to have multiple layers of defense. I can't describe them to you because I definitely get in trouble for that, but I feel very good about our defense. It doesn't mean that we can't have an event, but I will tell you that not long ago we had a major attack and we came through it without a issue. A major attack came out of China, like you said. But it was a major attack on us specifically, and I probably just broke confidences there as well, so you don't tell anybody. But we came out of that very well. So we've done well on cybersecurity. But again, I bring you back to the gas companies. This is not locally. It's not something you send a note to Wayne Christian about. But the gas industry throughout the country doesn't have the same regulations. They're much weaker on cybersecurity. You may recall back about less than a year ago, there was a major pipeline that was out for several days. It caused a lot of, problems on the East Coast. They simply haven't gone into the level of defenses that the electric industry has. And so I don't know why that is. It may be because their regulatory commission doesn't operate like the FERC does, but in the electric side, we've done a lot of work on that. Good. That was there one other, or is that good? All right. Well, I will stick around for any of you that want to talk more.
Let's give Mr. Jones a big round of applause for coming out. And I want to thank everybody for coming out. This was very critical to all of us. I personally was very frustrated back in February. I let him know about that when I met with him. And I think that was probably, everybody else had the same feelings. And, to the comments, things aren't perfect. They're not going to be perfect ever, but it's going to get much better. And we're going to have a reliable system someday in the very near future. So thank you very much for coming out. And I offer Brad to answer any individual questions that you may have. Thanks again, and thanks for your time.
Thank you for coming out of retirement to try and do something. Thank you for coming out of your retirement to try and do something.
Thank you. It does mean a lot.